So I hope you enjoyed my victorious snapshots of the rear suspension being installed. That's what I thought, The last part of this was to install the parking brakes, which, when I took these photos, I was like, oh man, this is the last part. I'm going to slap that in together, and it's going to be all good. It's going to be great. Not a problem, whatever. I did have some issues too with the install of the disc brakes in the rear. There was some issue where it wasn't clearing the brackets there. Somehow, I couldn't even tell you, but I ended up figuring that out. I think it was flip-flopped on the billet plate that the disc brakes go bolted in. So anyways, I got that sorted out. I actually called Heidts about it. They weren't very helpful on it, but we'll get into that a little later. So anyways, going back to this parking brake. So I took the parking brake. I was ready to slap that in. I was super excited, and it ended up hitting the differential. So on the back of that parking brake, there's the mechanism that pretty much just grabs the brake. So it's like a lever piece. So that always kept hitting the rear differential. So I went back to the instructions from Heidts. I went to the very beginning where it has you put together the shafts on the differential housing itself. And if you look at that instructions, that's what it says. If you're using a parking brake, then use the other brackets that they have that have holes where you could bolt in the parking brake. That's all the instructions it gives you. So at the time, when I put this thing together, that seemed pretty straightforward to me. I didn't realize, that there was going to be any issues down the road. The bad part about this is that that's it. It just tells you to put the bracket and bolt it in, and you're done. Like, it sounds pretty straightforward, right? But the problem is that it didn't work. And I went to the internet, so I checked out Heidts again to make sure to see if there's any other information on there. There's nothing. I went back to the reseller site that I use, which is Stayaholics. Those guys have been pretty good, but I didn't reach out to them because I don't know. I just didn't reach out to them. So as I'm looking through their website, I come across this page that they have, the parking brake for sale from Willwood on Stayaholics. And Stayaholics does a really good job of posting up installation instructions. So I clicked on that, and there was a manual from Heidts talking about the parking brake install. So in this manual, what it really talks about is switching over the back lever of it when you install it to the Heidts. So from factory, from Willwood, it's preset on there, just 3 bolts on the back. So on this manual from Heidts, it says to rotate that so it can have clearance. So cool, all right. So I went back to the bench back here, put them down, I rotated it. Honestly, it doesn't even say how to rotate them. Counterclockwise, clockwise. So then you have to experiment a little bit, unless you get underneath the car and kind of look around, get an idea of where to rotate this thing. So then I go back underneath the car, and I had rotated it once, and I went in there, it was still hitting, came back to the bench, rotated again. And mind you, there's a gasket in between that parking brake lever that goes to the back of the parking brake. You screw that paper thin rubber gasket, and you're shit out of luck, and you have to get another one. So when you're doing that, please be careful with that, because it could be kind of frustrating when you're installing this parking brake. So I went back to that, no dice. I rotated that thing probably 3 or 4 different ways. There's only, so many ways you can rotate this thing, and it always kept hitting the differential. So at this point, hours into this part of it, I decided, you know what, I'm going to call during the week, I'm going to call Heidts, and I'm going to talk to them to see if they can offer me some information. So before I called them, I went back into the instructions, and I started doubting myself on the input shafts, the axle shafts that go into the housing of the independent rear suspension, with the photo above. The passenger side is a longer shaft versus the driver's side. So I ultimately thought that maybe that was it. Maybe that was causing some issues there. But I was pretty sure that I put in the right one because, it's pretty common sense. If the instructions say the longer shaft is on the passenger side, then it is, right? It had been so long since I installed that, I just wasn't sure anymore. So finally, I got a hold of Heidts. I talked to the guys there, and I get it. It's pretty hard to describe to somebody why that's hitting without them really actually seeing any pictures. So they asked me, hey, email us some pictures and let's see if we can help from there. So I did. I took some pictures and, I told them where, I was running into some problems there. Lo and behold, I did not get a response from Heidts ever. So mind you, back when I got my suspension powder coated, if you guys saw that last video, check out the link above. I talked about the color scheme, but I also talked about some issues that I had with the powder coating and Heidts. So going back to Heidts, I never got a response from them, which at this point, given my past experience with them, I was furious. You would think that, as a customer, you spend thousands of dollars on their suspension, that they're going to stand behind their products and they're going to have the technical support and they're really going to help you out. They're almost essentially useless. Back in that last video where I talked about the bushing replacements, it took me weeks to get these things, and I got the runaround from them, and then before the people there didn't want to help me. And mind you, I'm not a jerk about things. I want to be helped. I'm courteous. I'm professional. So I'm not a complete douchebag to people up until they start screwing me. So at this point, I was transferred out to another person. This guy was helping me out, and I was shocked to learn that they did not really understand what their bushings were. So that's alarming to me for what is needed for the Mustang kit. That sent a red flag to me, and I was just distraught because of that. But anyways, we're talking about this parking brake. I did not get a response from them. The customer service straight up sucks. Maybe it's just me, but I hate to say it, but I applaud companies like TCI Engineering. Those guys have been phenomenal, you guys. So, if you're looking for having great customer service, you might want to think about TCI Engineering, not only for your front suspension, but for that killer TCI torque arm kit that they have. Again, I wanted to go with an independent rear suspension. If I build another car down the road, I'm going straight TCI because they've been wonderful to work with, and it's been years since I bought their suspension. Anyways, okay, so I got frustrated with the lack of response from them, so I dove back into the suspension part of this, and I ended up having to take everything apart. I went back to Stangaholics, and I went back to their Heidts IRS page where they have the information there. And I just started looking through the pictures. Maybe there's something that's going to pop up. And lo and behold, I found a picture with the parking brake installed on their website. And immediately I saw that the parking brake was a lot higher than it was with mine. And if you take a look at this photo here, you see this, the parking brake caliper here. That part of it is a lot higher, and if you compare it to my photo here, mine's like completely the opposite. So I immediately thought, shoot, I installed this backwards, upside down, well, whatever. So I immediately tore down everything again. Mind you, this is hours of work at this point. Super frustrated. Again, as I said, I took apart this suspension. When I first got it, I reinstalled it, took it apart. Then I took it over for body work, and I reinstalled it, took it apart, and then I took it apart again. And with anything, before powder coating, and with everything you keep constantly taking apart, you're gonna F something up, right, at some point. So I took everything apart, and I went back. I started with the passenger side. I went over to the driver's side, took that apart, took the bracket, the parking brake bracket from the driver's side and brought it over to the passenger side, and lo and behold, it fit, and it actually shot up it pivoted the mounting brackets up higher, which then that related back to that picture that I saw at Stangaholics. So that was my problem. Heidts, I despise you guys, but please update that in your instructions. So then your customers like myself that are doing this stuff at home don't really have a whole lot of resources and or experience with, these sophisticated suspension setups, please put that in instructions. I mean, it does not hurt you guys to revise this, or somebody put a review. Maybe I'll put a review to help, you know, folks out there that are doing it themselves. I'm sure maybe the shops out there, you guys have a lot more experience with this. If you're constantly installing the independent rear suspension, then you know better. But for the guys like myself, first time doing it, first time putting this whole thing together, yeah, it's going to be very frustrating. So the lack of support from Heidts was awful. So once I put this back in, I was able to put that in. It bolted in perfectly. It wasn't hitting anything anymore. Super duper relieved. I was super excited at this point because now I had the passenger side done. So fantastic. Bolted that back in, moved over to the driver's side piece of it, put the bracket on. And as I'm torquing this thing down a little bit, because there's like X amount of pounds you have to torque this, it's nerve-wracking because the differential housing has threads in it, but at the same time, the housing is like a cast aluminum. So you got to be careful too as well, because you can break something. And if you break the casting, you're so effed. I cannot imagine. You probably have to either try to fix that, but that would require you to take the whole thing down. So anyways, I was being careful there, and I was torquing to specs, and you know, you get to the point where you're getting really close, and then things just start feeling very shady from torquing that. So lo and behold, this is what happened when I was doing that. So super frustrating, guys. But you know, I previously reached out to Heidts to get a bolt for the one of the bolts that goes into the front part of differential that bolts into the differential housing. And the guy said there, he's like, you know what, it's not even worth it to buy it through us because shipping's going to be high and we're going to charge you for the bolt. You're better off going to the hardware store. I mean, yes, I guess it's appropriate, but geez, guys, like, help the little guy out once in a while. I went to, 3 different hardware stores, the big box stores, and even the small Ace hardware stores. None of them had the correct bolts. Super frustrated. The good thing is about here in Fresno, California, is that we have Fresno Ag hardware store, who's phenomenal. That store has everything. So I didn't think about that until the 3rd store that I went to. One of the clerks there told me. So anyways, I got that bolt there, but since I broke this stud, now I had to go out there and find this one too as well. So went over to the Fresno Ag hardware store, phenomenal place. The guys there helped me. I was able to find not only the stud, but also the nut too to go with it. Exactly the same one that Heidts provided with their kit. So I got it in, put it back in, and reinstalled it, and we're done. So I hope you guys enjoyed this part of it. You know, it's quite a headache, and you know, I cannot stress that enough. You know, all you parts manufacturers out there, you know, help us out a little bit sometimes. Please beef up your customer service. Singaholics is great. TCI Engineering is awesome. There's been times where I've lost some bolts along the way, or even washers from TCI Engineering, and right away those guys respond real quick, and before you know it, in a couple of days, I have that out to me. That's all we ever ask for. And shoot, I'd be willing to pay for it, you know, if that's what it comes down to, of course, because it's really my fault. Happy to pay for it, but TCI, they know their shit, and they know their suspension. Not like Heidts, man, completely frustrating. So anyways, these next shots here, these are showcasing the installed suspension, so enjoy.